Welcome to the SCHEELS Outdoors Podcast, your source for information on hunting, fishing, and all of your outdoor passions.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the SCHEELS Outdoors Podcast. It is late October, and we are on the cusp of some of the best whitetail hunting of the season. The woods are coming alive with rubs and scrapes, and bucks are becoming more and more daylight active. And depending on where you're at in the country, those first does might be coming into estrus at any point in time. Today, we're going to be talking about whitetail rut and post-rut strategies. And with us today is a guy that arguably has some of the most seat time in the woods than anyone around, and that is the one and only Michael Waddell of Bone Collector. How are you doing today, Michael?
Doing great. I'm a little bit licking my chops because as we talk and you had that great intro about the rut coming in, I missed one of my big bucks on my farm here in Georgia last night. So I don't like to start a podcast off talking about failure, but I completely whiffed last night. The deer ended up ducking a little bit, but it'd be fun to kind of let you know what he was doing and how he was acting, especially if you're hunting in the South and even up north. You're right. As you introed this podcast, the season is here. This is the whitetail hunter's Christmas Eve right here. I mean, the deer are starting to move. They're scraping pre-ruts here most across the country, especially up north this last week around Halloween, as well as when you start talking that first week in November. That's the magical time of year. So it's begun, and it could be one of the cool things we can talk about of 2020. So a lot of bad things have happened, but the good thing is the fact that actually the rut's almost here.
Yeah, there's definitely been some difficulties in 2020, but you kind of got to hang your head high and look at the good stuff. And fortunately for us outdoorsmen, hunting is still open all over the place, and you can really get out and enjoy those things. So for those listeners out there that don't really know a lot about you, can you explain kind of who you are and how Bone Collector came to be?
Yeah, I've been a really blessed man. I mean, to me, it's a great American story. I mean, when it comes to what I have a chance to do to make a living, pretty much, I got started as a whitetail and turkey guide at Realtree Camouflage. Basically right out of high school, hunting and fishing was what I loved the most. I didn't realize you could make a living at it. Obviously, I knew of retail stores like SCHEELS. I knew of all these products that I loved, that I was a fan of, that I worked and saved my money to buy. But it was when I had a chance to start guiding and then met Bill Jordan, the guys at Realtree, David Blanton, that I started having a chance to run a camera and video. Back then, we was doing some stuff on TNN, the Nashville network. We had a show called Realtree Outdoors. That show is still airing right now on Outdoor Channel. And so one thing led to another, and I had a chance to work a couple of shows and promotions, and I started running a camera, producing. One thing led to another, and I had a chance to start hosting television shows back in around 2002 for Realtree. And that led to my opportunity to still be at Realtree, but to break out on my own and start a show called Bone Collector. So really hunting and fishing the outdoors is what I have a chance to celebrate. And obviously a big fan of what you guys do at the stores, and big fan of just having a chance to celebrate, everything outdoors, from sports as well as the other side of sports that I think is a favorite pastime, and that's outdoors and hunting and fishing. So that's pretty much how I got started. And Bone Collector is a show that we've been airing since 2009. We've been very blessed. We've had a chance to win some fan favorite awards and have a really solid, high-rated show on Outdoor Channel as it airs currently. We've had some cool digital projects, and so it's just been a pleasure. And I don't think I've ever been in a time in my career that now I'm more convicted to celebrate and promote the outdoors and this lifestyle more now than I ever have been. I think even early in my career, I was a little bit more selfish and just concentrating on filling tags and wanting to get a big buck or get one more turkey. And now I feel like I slow down a lot more, and I can enjoy exactly what it is we do, and having a chance to share that and get somebody else to come into a store to buy a product, to buy a hunting license or a fishing license. I think now that's been even sweeter to be able to be part of that.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So for those people out there that have aspirations of wanting to film and become a part of the outdoor industry, do you have any advice for those people?
I do. Really, it's the same advice I would give anybody in any career. One is, no matter what you do, if you put your heart and soul in it, there's a chance to succeed. So one is be ready to work. I think a lot of people sometimes look at the outdoor industry, whether it's running a camera or videoing or producing, and even as a chance to get a chance to host, or if you want to call it, be a personality for a brand. You have to be willing to give it your all. You have to be willing to work. So hard work is the number one thing, and looking for opportunities and trying to make a difference. I think the biggest thing people probably get blindsided by in their pursuit to be hunting and video and for TV shows and for the outdoor channel or these networks is you think about the fun that'll be had, but you also think that it can be easy. And sometimes you can arrogantly approach it to think that, well, I'm just going to start off and I'm going to be an outdoor personality. I would tell any young man or even anybody, older or middle age, start somewhere and work your way up, and don't be afraid to do more than you're asked to do, and find something to do and do something even if it's wrong. And if you'll work hard and keep in mind that the number one goal is to sell hunting license and to celebrate the outdoors and be yourself, I think there's a chance to succeed. There's more opportunity than it ever has been when it comes to podcasts, when it comes to digital media, when it comes to network that celebrate outdoors, hunting and fishing. So there's a lot of opportunity, but it isn't about how big an animal that you shoot or even what you shoot a lot of times or how many fish you catch. It's about the excitement, the sincerity, and the legitimacy that you celebrate it. And can you be one of those people that people want to share a campfire with, that they want to sit around and hang out with, that they look forward to, throwing some ribs on a smoker or maybe having an adult beverage at the end of the night, and to where you make it fun? Are you somebody that celebrates that your family wants to be a part of that no matter if you're from north, south, east, or west, that you want to, get around each other and have a good time? And so when you celebrate it at a place to where you put fun first, then you got an opportunity. And obviously the technical part of it will come, the big bucks will come, and you will get better. So it ain't about how good you are, or what kind of professional hunter you are, or what kind of, athlete you are. If you're a hunter, it's really about your enthusiasm and your legitimacy and the foundation of what hunting means to you. And I think if you keep those things in mind, hard work, foundation, sincerity, legitimacy, you got a chance to make it, whether it's running a camera, whether it's editing, whether it's hosting a podcast, or even being a personality as part of a show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you just brought up so many great points, and that's how we feel at SCHEELS too. Is it's really just a celebration of the outdoors. Social media nowadays can be a bit jaded. Everyone's just posting their biggest pictures, but it's truly about getting out there and making memories and just enjoying the experiences.
There's no doubt, and I think that gets missed. I mean, we're in a world to where everything we do, whether it's this conversation you and I can have about hunting, whether it gets technical, whether it's just story time with Waddell and we're just telling stories about life in general, or big bucks that got away, or some that we put tags on. Right now we're in a place that we can celebrate things immediately. We can show our pictures, we can show our personalities, we can show the real side, or we can somewhat fake it and show a glamour shot side of what we do, whether we're a girl that wants attention with our looks, or maybe we think we'll get more attention in camouflage or with a bow, or maybe it's a guy that thinks if I can get a big buck, maybe I'll get an opportunity for a contract. In reality, it's so simple. It really is just about your true passion. And if your true passion is just to be a celebrity, or if your true passion is just to be somebody with a lot of followers, or if your true passion is to be popular and you try to run a popularity contest, you will fail almost every time. But if you just sincerely let people know who you are, and if you have a foundation of legitimacy and excitement around hunting and fishing, you don't even have to be the best, because your best is coming out through what you are doing through this outdoors and Good Lord's renewable resource, and the people that you meet in the camps and the places you see, the things you see. So even though that's pretty deep in philosophy, the foundation of being successful in this field is not that hard. It's just about making it about what we are all trying to do. And the reason we all go into SCHEELS and we buy that brand new Hoyt bow and buy a $30, $40 pack of broadheads, the really reason that gets us out there is just to be out there, to go outside the doors and to have fun. And so I think sometimes the industry in today's world, we forget that it's not a competition. And I say it all the time. I don't think hunting makes you a badass. I think it's just badass we get a chance to hunt. And so even though hunting can be considered a sport, it's different than baseball or football, to where you can excel above somebody else, and that gets you a position on the team. And if you play in the NFL, maybe gets you a better salary. In this world, the big bucks that we put tags on are a bonus. That is a personal victory that we have. I don't think it's necessarily necessary to get a better contract or more endorsements or more followers. I think the ultimate thing is, how do you celebrate it, and how much fun do they see you having through that? And that's what is contagious. That's my personal opinion. And that's what I've seen. And that's what always gravitated me to certain personalities. And really, hunting itself is not just about the hunt and filling tags. It's really about those breakfasts afterwards, those stories, those times, those different personalities. Whether it was old Scott Steiner, who would always eat 8 biscuits after we got through hunting, and nobody got a biscuit after the hunt. You guys have that up north, where you're looking for a piece of sausage around a fire, and old Bubba Joe Blankenship's and ate everything before you even had a chance to get to camp. And so it's so many things that go into it. And that guy that's just solely focused on killing a buck to get the tape measure out to measure that buck, man, he can live a lonely life out there trying to just kill that big buck. If you take it all in, and in the process you are lucky to get some big bucks and fill some tags on some magnificent animals, holy cow, look at the memories, look at what went into it, and look at how much fun you had doing that. And I think when people see that, that becomes something you want to step into that world. And that's what makes people want to come to y'all stores. Buy them some camouflage, buy them a fishing lure, buy them a bow, buy them a new gun or a shotgun. So that's a long-winded version of how passionate I am about what this outdoors means to me. And I think it's a very simple way that we can all celebrate it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's some excellent insight, Michael. Very, very good to hear that point of view. And like you said, it's really just a celebration of the outdoors, and preserving for the future too. So
absolutely,
let's dive into the meat and potatoes of this. Let's really get into the rut and the post rut tactics now. So starting out, what do you look for in an area to set up in during the rut?
Man, there's a lot. The good thing about the rut, or even this pre-rut, which right now, this last week in October, I'm hoping this is airing pretty much as we shoot it or talk about things.
Yeah, the goal is to turn it around and have this come out tomorrow. So I've got some work ahead of me.
Sweet. All right. That to me, when you start getting at this time of year, and this time of year, the fortunate thing, it happens this time of year all across the country. So if you are blessed to hunt multiple states, you can only really pick one place to go that last week of October, one place to be that first week of November. Most of us don't have, Learjets and private aviation that we can just jump and, shoot a deer one evening and then be in Kansas the next day. And so depending on where the rut is happening the most, but pretty much the last week in October, the first week in November, what I like to do in the areas I'm looking for is, one is, a lot of people ask me is, what are you looking for and when do my deer rut? The good news about rutting whitetails, even though it's theorized, and this time of year, the first little spike that runs a doe by, like the rut's on, baby, they're locked down with does. Well, that's not necessarily the case. And usually any place you hunt, whether it's your home turf or you visit, you can talk to a biologist, and based on them pulling fetuses from does that either had been taken to processors or even a roadkill, that they can do studies on, these state and fish biologists, they can kind of give you that gestation, I think that's the word, of when that doe became impregnated, and maybe that following year. And they can say that, look, in this area, this county, the deer are breeding the most, let's say November 7th through November 9th. So what I've always done is, I'm a traveling hunter, and even around here, you can just about subtract 10 to 15 days from that particular date to where the biologist can tell you that most of the peak breeding was done. And if you subtract it back 10 to 15 days, a lot of times what you'll find, you will see deer that are in that preliminary rut to where they're cruising, they're looking. And all the way up to that lockdown stage where most of those deers are being bred, you can see a lot of buck activity. So where do I go to find that buck activity? Most of the time you start getting close to that, you just need to find the does. So if you can find an area to where there is a food source, you find deer movement when you are looking to go to that rut, especially that pre-rut. If you can find a number of does and where they are concentrated, it's a little different than early season, where sometimes these bigger bucks are loners. They run in bachelor groups, or they're by themselves and they don't want to be around all that heavy traffic of other deer. They're looking for that community. They're looking for those does. And so that's what I'll do, is I'll just try to find deer in general. And when I get to that, last week in October, first week in November, I want to be around a hub of whitetail deer. And then obviously try to find some areas in the morning that I can slip in that maybe I go undetected, that's right off a green field or a crop field. So finding the deer. And if you find the deer, you'll find that buck that's cruising through trying to find that first doe to cut out of the herd.
Mm-hmm. Are you putting any focus on setting up on buck sign versus congregated does, or are you basically solely focused on where that doe is going to be at?
Depends on the time of year. If it's like in that lull time of year that everybody talks about, this October lull, yes, I will look for a lot of rubs and scrapes. But that typically, even though that looks really ruddy, my personal opinion is there's not a lot of breeding or nothing's happening there. That's just a buck who is kind of like us, that's been watching the NFL football game, and you see the shrapnel of our hot wings and tater skins and leftover Mountain Dews. We've been spending a lot of time there, but we're not really getting a lot done there. And so obviously that scenario changed. So yeah, if you're on a laid back, spending a lot of time in there, you're going to leave a lot of signs. So yes, in that lull period, say that first couple weeks in October, I definitely, if I see some buck sign, that lets me know these bucks they're not bedding far. They're spending a lot of time in this area. They're peeing, they're scraping, they're rubbing, they're spending a lot of time. But as I get into that last week in October, I know those bucks are going to be leaving those areas. They still might be bedding and using those areas, but they're going to be looking for those does. So they're going to be cruising a lot more. So for me, a lot of that sign that looks very ruddy is indeed a sign that maybe it ain't as crazy with doe activity, not necessarily, but obviously those first areas that start having a lot of does, those bucks will come into it. Even those does are not maybe ready to breed, those bucks will quickly start marking territory. They're working out all the sexual frustration. They're ready to go. They're not interested in eating. They're really wanting to breed, but it's not quite time. I think personally that's when these deer are the most vulnerable, is when they are first come out of hiding, and they're not. Sometimes they go from a nocturnal animal to making mistakes 30 minutes to an hour into daylight in the morning, and maybe they're coming out 30 minutes to an hour early before nightfall. And it's not just because they're hungry, it's because they're sexually frustrated. And when you can get that scenario and that perfect storm of where these does are, and they're constantly coming to check them, man, you can have some opportunity. And I think it's the best opportunity.
Mm-hmm. What are some great ways to take advantage of those frustrations? Like from a calling standpoint or setup changes? What are you thinking there?
I definitely, and it depends. Everything's different. Like all across the country, like where I'm hunting in the South, very tight quarters. We don't have as many open areas, a lot of planted pines, thickets, not as many funnels. You start getting into the Midwest, if you maybe have some of those crop field edges, double corners. I love double corners. Greg Miller, a native right there by y'all, he's the one that taught me a lot about hunting double corners. Get in an area to where deer are going to be cruising a lot, to where they're going to make mistakes. So a lot of times that time of year, if you can get in an area to where you can just see deer, and you see a buck that cruises by, maybe you're still bow hunting, but almost taking a rifle hunt approach to it to visually see those deer. They are not typically going to be locked down with a doe. They're hoping for this opportunity to have a doe. And a lot of times at that point, when you see these deer traveling these edges, and maybe it's a CRP field or a grown-up field or clear cut, at that point, yeah, a grunt call, a rattle bag, maybe it is a decoy. Man, you can do some unbelievable magic with calling that time of year when you get your solo buck, a mature buck that's cruising. He's been looking all night. He ain't found anything to breed. He's cracking daylight. You're in a stand. This deer is not going to even be feeding by you, but you're in an area, a double corner that maybe he is going to walk through this area, and you can hit him with a grunt call, snort, wheeze, or rattle. A lot of times that deer will turn and not just walk, but trot right into your stand, because he thinks that scenario, he's been looking so hard. So he's anxious, just like us. When somebody brings the appetizer plate up, we know we're going to get a filet mignon sooner or later, but we're starving. And you throw those freaking mozzarella sticks, we freaking digging in. And so I think that's the kind of analogy I would use for that big buck. He hears that scenario of what he thinks he's been looking for the last several days. A lot of times you can manipulate them with calls. And so where I'm looking for in these situations is areas that I can see deer, especially if I'm in an area that I'm unfamiliar with. Looking at, we use base maps a lot. I love that app. That gives me an idea of kind of where I might want to start. So I'll get into areas that I can see for a long ways and see what these deer are doing. And a lot of times through fine tuning where I really want to get based on where I think these deer want to move through, a lot of times we'll be able to manipulate one in that pre-rut time of year with a call or a rattle bag, and we don't even have to tweak our stands. We'll make him come to an area that he wasn't even naturally going to come to, but he thinks that, what he's hoping for is happening that particular morning or that particular evening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In terms of your calling, are you ever doing blind calling, or do you strictly reserve that to when you have a visual on a deer? And how do you know when to grunt versus bleat versus rattle or even roar?
I don't do a lot of blind calling. Typically, I'm usually trying to observe deer first and then manipulate them once I get to a point that I can see their reactions. And I think that reaction alone will give me an opportunity to know what I'm going to hit them with. So the way I call deer is no different than the way I would work elk or a turkey. If you can see their attitude toward the call, you can get away with a lot more. And I've even had opportunities, let's say a snort wheeze, which is probably my favorite call to manipulate a mature buck. I killed a buck with a snort wheeze the first week in September out in Wyoming. The deer was coming back from alfalfa field, had no intentions. He was coming 150 yards. I snort wheezed at this deer, and he turned and looked, and I snort wheezed again. And this deer, not in an aggressive way, out of curiosity of wondering why a deer would be up there, being aggressive, walked all the way in. I got a 40-yard shot with my bow and killed a 155-inch whitetail in Wyoming. So deer are vocal, and I do like to call when I can see them. I will blind call in Georgia a lot of times if nothing's happening, especially late in the morning. I will call, but a lot of times if I feel pretty good about my setup, I will have calls available, but more to do it when I get a visual on that deer, especially if it being a buck from long range. And I would say I typically start off with a grunt. If I see the deer, I grunt a couple times first, but be a little bit more aggressive. I think people are kind of halfway timid. It's kind of like calling a turkey. You don't know if you want to hear them. You don't want to get too much, and you got this insecurity to think, well, this might spook them. If you have confidence that you're just making a sound like a deer grunting, which there is so many noises and grunts that all can simulate that sound. I will grunt first, and a lot of times deer hear it. He'll look and pay no attention, keep walking. From that point, I'll snort wheeze at him. And a lot of times that aggression of a snort wheeze, I've had deer that will not even react or even really look at a grunt call, and then you snort wheeze, and they will turn on a dime and come. And then my last option, if I'm sight working a deer, is rattling. And if you go through that scenario and they don't turn and come to you, then you know that buck is not happening. You can kind of rest assured either the person or that deer has no aggression. But I would say in the right doe to buck ratio, you're going to typically get a reaction from that deer. If you see him and he's truly in a cruise mode, you will get some type of reaction, and you might have an opportunity for that deer to come. And when that deer is approaching, you better make sure you know which way the wind's blowing or drifting to, because you can guarantee he's going to drift to that side. That is where he's going to be coming at. So that you can guarantee.
Mm-hmm. Very good information. When you're calling at a deer, are you generally like blowing right at him, or are you pointing to the side to kind of make sure he doesn't know exactly where you're coming from?
To me, it's all about, what that deer's, what his activity is when I see him. A lot of time, if he's clipping through, because keep in mind, if it's nocturnal, a lot of times a buck, if he's on a mission and he's really walking through bedding areas, he's cruising. He's truly in a transition cruise mode. So I usually will get aggressive. And a lot of times, let's face it, we're on our phone, we're over there playing Yahtzee or, some type of puzzle or Angry Birds, whatever it is you're playing, or texting, looking at Instagram. And a lot of times we look up and the buck is almost through the flat. You're like, oh my God. So a lot of times I'm usually right at them aggressively, right off the bat, not just make sure you hear me and see your reaction. Because keep in mind, a lot of times you're going to be 150, 200 yards when you see this deer. You're bow hunting. Obviously, if you're rifle hunting, no need to grunt. Just pick it up and let him hold it. He's made the mistake. He was cruising, and he made the mistake. But if you're trying to get this deer within 50 yards, with a bow and arrow, go ahead and let him hear it. And I'll make sure, and I'll point it right at him. And maybe if I got that deer, if he's sitting there looking and he's looking in our tree, well, obviously you don't want to be seen. At that next grunt, I might try to throw it off to the side a little bit just to try to create an illusion of where I'm hoping I can be some kind of ventriloquist. But what you'll find, the pinpoint accuracy, just like a turkey or an elk, they will pinpoint that. And most of the time, even from the first grunt, they will be on the way. So many times I've had them kind of start coming to a grunt and have to finish them with a snort wheeze. I've had that happen. But at that point, what's so beautiful about being in that situation, a typical whitetail hunt that takes strategic luck to be in the right place at the right time when this deer decides not to be nocturnal, you all of a sudden become a hunter, like a turkey hunter, like a deer, like an elk hunter, and you are manipulating this deer with a vocalization. And that is one of the most amazing opportunities and feelings if you're a whitetail hunter, because that doesn't happen, and it cannot happen, but only a certain window within the year. So when you get that opportunity, it's just magical. And when they do finally commit, keep in mind, they're going to come to the downwind side of you. They're not coming to skirt you at 100 yards. When they finally can figure out where they want to be, they're coming to your tree. So a lot of times, depending on the wind, you might get you a 10, 15-yard shot, and it is just adrenaline rush.
Mm-hmm. Are you setting up your stand locations anticipating that then?
I definitely am anticipating, if I'm calling to a deer, which way the wind's blowing. So my stand location, and it was Don Kiske. I never forget. It was a valuable lesson I learned. He killed a big old deer on video one time in Iowa, and I never forget, this buck cruised by him one morning, and he didn't even call at him. And I said, Don, why didn't you call at him? He said, well, the wind was out of the north. It was blowing kind of at him. He said, if I would have called, that deer would have circled so quick on me that he would have winded me. There's no doubt in my mind I would have called at that deer the first time, because this deer was obviously cruising looking for does. But Don was smart enough to know it was an evening hunt, that the thermals were pulling down, that this deer would have winded him quickly. And so sure enough, it wasn't 10 minutes later that deer circled and was coming on a better angle where the wind wasn't blowing. And when he got past him on the other side, he called. And that deer immediately started trotting in and was coming back around the tree to try to get where he would have been going first on the other angle. And Don shot him at 25 yards. And that to me was a high-level whitetail 202 tip on calling, to where Don knew, kind of like if you're a coyote hunter, he knew that that if the thermals that he was reading correctly, that deer probably wasn't going to come. And so I don't think I could have done that. But what I will set up for when I start calling, I will already have an idea which side of the tree that deer is going to be on, because it's going to be on that where the wind's blowing, because he's not coming. He's not up there thinking, dude, I got old Waddell from Georgia calling at me. Let me just make sure it ain't him. No, he 100% believes it's another buck, 100% believes that there's probably a doe in estrus. So keep in mind, his number one thing he trusts more than anything is his scent. So he is coming in to smell, to size up the situation. So he's not the only danger at that time that he presently is worried about is not a hunter. He's presently worried about what buck it is and where is this doe. So he's sizing up the situation with his nose. Well, guess what? That could quickly change to where, yep, I'm coming in, I'm going to fight. I might get a girlfriend in here, but then, oh my God, I smell a human, I'm out. So they're not coming trying to smell you. They're trying to smell that deer that they hear calling.
Oh, that's some awesome information. And yeah, that's definitely agree. That's either whitetail 202 or 303 on that one.
And it's just like elk. I mean, it's just like an elk. And, we always say like a turkey, which I know a lot of people listen are diehard turkey hunters. We always say if a turkey could smell, we might not ever kill one, because what if a turkey was trying to, scent check you as he come in and he's looking with those 10-time binoculars or whatever it is that the biologists say they got. I mean, you couldn't move, you couldn't hardly manipulate them, but luckily they can't smell. But an elk can smell. So that's why working in tandems and duos, a lot of time elk hunting, you might be 80 yards in front of the caller, and that elk is trying to circle this caller that and so you're kind of doing this spot and stalk, slipping through the woods, this Navy SEAL maneuver, trying to get that angle to kill him before he smells you, and definitely before he can get and smell this caller that he thinks is a cow or potentially another bull. So same scenario with whitetails or hunting coyotes. So you definitely have to think about that. And one thing that I love about calling the most is on those calm, clear, cold mornings where you got a good thermal rise. On a good frosty morning, a lot of times you are truly invisible because your thermals are going straight up, and those deer can't smell you. And my theory is the fact that I think a lot of the bigger bucks, record book bucks, are killed in the morning, especially with the bow and arrow, because of the thermals, not necessarily because of just deer movement, because those deer are more vulnerable to make a mistake with their nose.
Absolutely. I mean, you can fool the eyes and ears of whitetails now and then, but you're never going to fool that nose. So, and it makes perfect sense with the rising thermals being able to just kind of get away with a little bit more. So
there's no doubt. And you guys sell it all, at the stores. I mean, there's amazing product out there. We use a lot of that code blue, the decode. Yeah, I mean, it's scientifically proven it eliminates a lot of bacteria. You got the different cover scents, the nose jammers, you got, that liquid smoke, the code blue, you got all these masking scents, you got ozonics, you got all these things, you got it built into your clothing to help eliminate odor, and they legitimately do help, but it's nearly impossible. Those are just little small things that can help you. And I definitely think a lot of times they're worth the investment. However, it's really hard to fool that deer's nose. Those are just things that you can help hopefully get by with just a little bit of opportunity when that deer is at 40 yards and he's trying to smell you. You got a little scent. Maybe that's the investment that was worth it, that you at least was able to get to shot versus if you just didn't do anything. So.
Yeah, you can definitely get away with a lot more when you're using those scent control products.
Right.
So you touched on nocturnal bucks earlier in this conversation. How do you handle targeting nocturnal bucks? When do you know when to target one? Are you using trail cameras? What are you thinking there?
Well, one thing too, I'll say about nocturnal bucks, a lot of times people think that it is, human pressure that drives a deer or especially a buck to be nocturnal. That can be the case. However, by rule of thumb, every whitetail from does to the bucks, they're nocturnal animals. They technically, whether it's cold or hot, a whitetail deer enjoys the cover of nightfall. They are like vampires. They get excited when it's nighttime. They do most of their breeding at night. They feed at night. So even in areas that have no pressure, if you put a pile of bait out, if you legally can, you will find that with no pressure, even in a state park or a refuge, if you could, you will find that so much of that activity is nocturnal. So yes, the thing that I look for is if I can use bait to get a picture, or if I'm in a state that I can legally hunt over bait, or if it's a food plot, or if it's a trail. The biggest thing I do now, and the technology in these trail cameras are absolutely amazing. You can see when things and conditions get right. You'll start seeing patterns to where maybe it's your target 8-pointer that has been nocturnal all summer, but all of a sudden it starts getting about October 17th and 18th. This deer is not leaving the area. You're not going to run him out. People's like, man, I don't want to run this deer out and hunt him. Well, it's hard to run that deer out because you got to keep in mind, if you are, let's just call it a chum pile that I call it, that you're trying to get an inventory of your deer, and it's summertime and it's legal. Maybe it's not legal to hunt over, but it's legal to get these pictures. You're going in there with a four-wheeler, typically with your little 4-year-old kid and your wife or girlfriend or whatever it is, riding in there, beating around, throwing out Big and J, whatever it is, and you'll leave 2 hours after dark. Your big buck that you're praying you can get in range, come opening day or November, is going to be there. 2 days later, you come over there, you got a Saturday off, and you're like, man, I'm going to ride back over to my lease and I'm a hunting ground, and you ride in there and you beat around. And you think about that. That's real pressure. You might get out. If you're with the lady, or usually they're going to use the restroom or something. And again, you don't worry about it. And you cannot run that deer off. He's like a goat in the corral. He's still coming to your pile. So as it gets closer to the season, a lot of times what happens is when you find these situations, you really just have to wait for that buck to let you know and kind of create a pattern. And I've noticed a lot of times they'll start making a mistake. Now, a lot of times he might make one mistake all year, especially if it's just a feeding pattern. But if you see a buck starting to make a mistake, and maybe it is you're trying to figure out, wait a minute, bucks are showing up, that might let you know that this buck is starting to jump the gun. Maybe not because of the food source, because of the rut. So yes, I will say the long-winded answer to that is I do love trail cameras to help me figure out when my optimal strategic luck could come into place. Because just like everybody listening or watching, we have families, we have jobs, and those cameras can give you an idea of a reoccurring pattern of mistakes or deer that are staying nocturnal. So when you start seeing some mistakes, I think that's when you can talk to your boss and say, hey, can I have the next 3 days off? I need to, or at least let me have these next 3 evenings off because, I got an opportunity, versus blindly just taking off work. I think these trail cameras can give you an opportunity, especially the ones that send them to your phone, your cellular cameras. If you got an opportunity, you might have that camera might be burning up all night. It's going to be cold and clear. And 2 days before this buck cruised by at 7:38, right at daylight or an hour after daylight. That's the time to call your boss. Like, hey, boss, do you mind, this morning, or maybe if you want to push it, go ahead and get in the stand. Just call him like, hey man, I'm not feeling good. I'm not feeling good. I'm gonna be in there about 10 o'clock this morning. I had to do a few things. I ain't saying lie, but those cameras will give you an opportunity to know that it's happening. It's going on. There's a chance of mistakes. So that's how I hunt a lot of times. And those trail cameras have changed the game. I will say, to add to that, don't let them lull you to sleep. The buck that I missed last night, these deer are starting to cruise. I have not had a hard horn picture of this deer since I have not got one. The last picture I got of him was early September. He still was in velvet. I was wondering where this particular buck had gone. This deer came in to a food plot. I shot and missed him, and he went real close to my camera, but not at the camera, and I still wouldn't have a picture. So if I hadn't hunted and had the video evidence on our Bone Collector TV show, I would not even know that deer had been in the area. And I don't think where I end up shooting at him, I don't think I would have got a picture of him last night based on where my camera was. So sometimes you do have to be out there in person to figure it out. But those trail cameras help you a lot when it comes to personal time, family, and jobs. It gives you a better strategic, statistical approach to knowing when that deer could be making mistakes.
Absolutely. Cameras are so beneficial, but they can be a bit of a double-edged sword, like you said, in that hunting instance. Sometimes people might not hunt an area because, I don't have a big buck on camera there, but, nothing replaces some actual seat time and being able to see 360 degrees versus about, 60 degrees in your trail camera.
I agree. I agree.
So when you're setting up your trail cameras, do you usually put stands within like shooting distance of that camera, or do you like to back your hunting setups off of where your cameras are at?
I end up a lot of times where, especially early season, our new property, I'm always just putting as many or a plethora of trail cameras out, as much as I can afford. And then I will adjust the stand strategy based on once I get an inventory. And a lot of times I don't get crazy strategic when I'm putting out my cameras a lot of times, especially if it is early season and you can use an attractant to get the pictures. Now, if it's in an area to where you legally take a Montana, I'm sure there's places in Wisconsin. I don't know all the rules there. I hadn't hunted a lot there. You might not can ever, because of CWD, ever put out any type of bait, so you have to use natural habitat, natural food sources. So at that place, I'm still putting the cameras out to get an inventory. And through that process, once I kind of realize that there's 3 or 4 big mature bucks that I really would like to maybe put a tag on, then I can snoop in that area and start putting stands up more strategically. And yes, if it's in a good spot, let's say it is a food plot or a food source or acorn tree or, soft mass tree, persimmon or apple, I will put it right there. I'll just keep in mind too, one thing about, let's just say, a place where you can legally bait, or let's just say that legal bait is a persimmon tree or a white oak acorn tree, one-off tree. Keep in mind, no matter which way the wind blowing, again, getting back to like we was talking calling, 90% of the time, those deer, especially mature buck, will circle that food source to get a good wind on as he's approaching. Once again, danger is one thing, but also he's trying to size up what is under this tree. Is there other deer? Is there coyotes? Is there bobcats? You might be out west. It could be, are there mountain lions? Or who knows? So you got to keep in mind, if you get really, really close to that food source, there is even better chance you can get winded as that deer is circling in. So you might think you got a perfect wind, But as that deer comes in, I've seen them come around to the backside of that food source, and they'll wind you before you can still get a shot. So a lot of times I will pull off 30, 40 yards from a bait pile or a food source or an acorn tree. And a lot of times that deer will make a mistake. But then again, you can sit there and get real strategic and think of it. And I've had deer come straight in. I'm sitting there 30, 40 yards in a stick. And I'm like, why didn't I just get right on top of this? The buck just walked right in and ate carelessly. So sometimes you can overthink it. But as long as you understand their approach to a food source or to a call, it gives you a better opportunity to know what traditionally they will do. So you have those rules of thumbs, and that's one of them right there. So I'm not afraid to get too close, but a lot of times I am aware of the fact that where these deer bedding and as they're approaching this food source where I'm getting these trail cam pictures, am I going to be able to get a shot either at he's coming to eat at this place or to work potentially this scrape, or am I, committed to shooting him exactly at this spot where my camera is? That's the things that you have to fill out. Every hunter have to kind of digest and statistically decide how they want to approach that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So situation for you, you're in a state where you can legally bait. You're trying to develop an inventory. And you mentioned that, that some deer, especially like a wily old buck, will circle it and sometimes maybe not commit all the way. Do you ever set up trail cameras like 30 to 50 yards, additional trail cameras, 30 to 50 yards off of your bait sources to try and find those deer that are in the area but not willing to commit to your bait site?
I have not done that very little. Usually if I am doing that, it's typically I've already got that buck observed, inventory of him, and now I'm coming around there to try to find possibly the trail or maybe better figure out where I think this deer could be bedding. I would say the number one reason I don't do that, I think that's a great strategy. I think the number one reason is the affordability, because if I'm in a new area, what I found, I would say your high percentages of that deer, maybe not coming the first night or the first time he smells this corn pile or pile of Big and J. I think eventually that deer is going to come on in and eat, whether he's a big deer or a young buck or, a doe. They're eventually going to come to that bait pile. So you can about rest assured your percentages are very high. You will get an inventory of the deer on that area on this particular bait pile if it's legal. So a lot of times, if that's the case, and I got a new place, and let's just say I got 5 or 6 cameras, I will typically want to be greedily have all of those cameras on all those other food sources. And then once I find after 4 or 5 days or a week or two, and I find out, wait a minute, there's nothing but does and small bucks on these 3 cameras, but these 2 cameras have really good bucks on them. Man, now I might pull a camera from that deal and I might start doing more of what you just suggested to try to find out where this deer might be coming from. But I think typically out of the expense of trail cameras, especially the cellular cameras, I'm more using them to try to just get the true inventory of what's there. And then I will use multiple trail cameras to more dial in how I want to hunt and where I might want to put a stand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense just from a statistical standpoint, finding your deer right away. And then once you're starting to hone it in, maybe move another trail camera to that spot and really hone in onto that trail where they're going at. So,
and one thing I would add to that too is now I think that idea that you mentioned, I think it's a heck of an idea. So, one thing I'm friends with a lot of these hunting personalities and some of these deer hunters that, let's face it, we're very spoiled because our job is typically we got partners. So we've got deals to where we have, just like the professional softball player, he's got the best bats, an unlimited supply of them that y'all sell at SCHEELS. I mean, he's hitting home runs, but he's supposed to. And so you get people like the Don Kiskis or the Lee Lakoskis or the Drurys. The amount of trail cameras that they run would blow your mind. It's staggering. Keep in mind, they get them for free. They're not having to buy these cameras. So they run a staggering amount of trail cameras for inventory. But as you know, I always am I'm spoiled